Illuminator, the Vibrator Lunae.
Skibbity
Yes,
Luna.
Skibbity Luna.
Welcome back to the Shade Chamber, a Genshin podcast by Smarks for Smarks. You're catching us in the middle of talking about the 4.x mechanical changes. Listen as we discuss the mystery of the Lost Gotcha system, the Chronicled Wish banner, then a discussion on the new endgame mode that we actually quite enjoy, the Imaginarium Theater. But before we really get into it, if you want to chat with us a little more directly, join us at our new joint Discord server with the Tales of Teyvat crew, the Shades of Teyvat Discord server. Without further ado, on to the episode.
First of all, on our journey to chronicle Genshin and how it changes throughout its lifespan, we have to talk about features that come and go. First being the Chronicled Wish banner. What was this?
This was like a weird advanced pity banner for grabbing characters that otherwise weren't getting rotated in super quickly, but it also disappeared. It's gone now. I don't even remember how it fully works because it's not here anymore.
Literally, none of us engaged with it because we had no reason to, and we just kind of thought it would be around forever, the way rolling on 2 banners is now around forever instead of 1. But it actually went away quietly. We should probably say what it was to the best of our ability. The churls will now attempt to recall what a Chronicled Wish was from memory. Okay, so the Chronicled Wish used to be another pool that you would roll your intertwined fates on. So the quote unquote, I guess rainbow rolling currency and not the blue standard currency for characters and weapons that were quite old and had been rerun a whole bunch. The first and only, I guess, Chronicled Wish banner was called Ode to the Dawn Breeze, and that was a smattering of Mondstadt stuff. So it was a combination of standard rollable 5-star Mondstadt characters like Mona and Diluc and Jean, but it also had Eula, Albedo, and Klee in it. It also had a pretty wide variety of Mondstadt weapons, including Skyward Blade, Aquila Favonia, Song of Broken Pines, Wolf's Gravestone, kind of all your standard old greatest hits from the early days of Genshin. The 4-star characters and weapons were similarly Mondstadt related. Stands to reason they probably would have done similar regional themes for later banners if they ever did this again.
It was similar to the way that the new weapon pity system worked, where you select between the two, featured 5-star weapons on a banner now, and then they give you a automatic, you will get this weapon if you don't roll it the first 2 times.
If you chose a character you wanted to roll towards, that meant all the 5 stars in the wish would be characters. If you wanted to pull for a weapon, all the 5 stars that could appear would be weapons. So you wouldn't get spooked with a character if you're trying to roll for a weapon and vice versa. How many times did you have to roll for it to guarantee? According to the wiki, you only had to hit pity once and miss your goal for the next pity to be the guaranteed item, unlike the epitomized path on the current weapon banner, which requires you to do it twice. So it actually was slightly more generous. Yeah, a weird thing. I'm not sure why they did it, and I'm not sure why they sunset it. Maybe they didn't have enough of a backlog of old characters and things. Maybe they just realized it wasn't as lucrative as peddling the newest hotness.
And I think that's in part because it competed directly with the primary limited time banners because it took intertwined fates instead of acquaint fates,
and no one wanted to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've talked a bit about how it's pretty remarkable that Genshin got its gotcha mechanics nailed in 1 and has never really had to tweak them or roll them back, but this is kind of the biggest exception. It actually went away quietly.
Yeah, they don't tend to phase out systems without saying anything about it.
I don't think, did we even get apologies for them sunsetting it? They really just wanted to kind of hush put it away. Either way, we remember it. Other things they decided not to do anymore. Waste our time being flinched to death in the Mondstadt talent domain. Early game talent domains got nerfed. The really annoying and unfun debuffs have been removed, replaced with, I think, mostly buffs across the board. But anyway, things that felt a lot less bullshit than, say, a bunch of icicles that prevent you from playing the game.
Thank God. I fucking farmed that that domain so many times, and it was always the worst thing.
Yes, I've heard people say that the weapon mats one, the water Mondstadt domain is the worst one, but that one sucked. But you know what?
Just bring Cryo.
What's a cryo? But at least the downside of that was running around while you had no energy instead of being flinched to death. So good riddance.
Yeah, not much to say on it other than I'm glad they decided to not make my life miserable.
They've even lowered the difficulty of certain things in story and Archon quests. For instance, the anti-Raiden Shogun training segment where you had to like fight a turret in Inazuma, that's purportedly been lowered. I actually remember having a lot of trouble with that. And hilariously, Amber's gliding test has had its difficulty somehow lowered.
So if that was the barrier to you playing the game, congratulations, you can finally get in.
Our headcanon is, of course, Dawe leaves Genshin alone for vast periods of time. This is not his baby. And we like to think that he came back after a couple years on Star Rail or whatever, played some early game stuff and went, this is bullshit. Why is it like this? Why are we putting people through this? Fix it. So thank you, Dawe, and your skill issues for giving us a smoother Mondstadt Liyue experience. They're making it easier than ever for us to do our dailies. Now, merely opening treasure chests or even, I think, burning resin counts towards getting commissions done. I absolutely loved not having to do a single commission in Fontaine before I left. Especially that one near the statue in the city where you get roped into that guy talking to the slug and having your entire like gameplay hijacked for 5 minutes.
I
Yes,
always think that's the intro to an event, and I always like pay attention for the first like 38 seconds of it before I realize I've played it before.
And it's literally just bureaucracy bullshit. It's, hey, we don't have the right form we need to turn in to sell a thing. And then you have to go find the form. It's so stupid.
And I will never complete that commission.
The
out of
only
spite.
French thing in the whole game.
Yes. So it'll be interesting to see what other things they're kind of shoring up as they reassess Genshin. We are coming up on 5 years into the lifetime of this game. That's like over half a console generation, significant amount of time for a game to be out. It's kind of like halfway through the projected life cycle of Genshin Impact, and seeing kind of like what needs an improvement, what needs a polish, and what needs to just be like outright excised is kind of interesting. We know they're going into a graphical overhaul of some kind in Notlon. I'm very excited for that. I know it's probably not going to be like as extensive as I would like it to be. I think the Genshin models are definitely looking jankier and jankier as new Hoyo titles come out, and it'd be great if they had a fresh pass, but I will be more than content if they can just do the lip flap matching that they do for Honkai Star Rail.
It is hard to port things backwards in Unity because Unity is notoriously completely awful for doing any sort of backwards compatibility within itself, but it would be nice to see if they could somehow backwards engineer it within the studio to make something nice looking.
And one day, maybe Raiden Shogun will say her overworld voice line for When It Rains. It's been 3 years. But it's not entirely doom and gloom when it comes to the gameplay released over the version 4 patches. There's actually a really exciting new innovative gameplay mode that came out. So, once upon a time, there was a free-to-play character collecting game that everyone just loved. And it was a lot of fun. It had surprisingly high production value for a member of its genre. A lot of characters that you could end up playing as with all sorts of various interesting powers, and you had to build them and invest in them. And people enjoyed it for a time, but then they realized they were getting bored of the same old meta characters that they would use at the endgame repeatedly. Luckily, there was a hot new gameplay mode that gave you a randomized selection of characters that you already had, encouraging you to try new things and to sort of start building out your collection laterally instead of investing deeply into a few choice meta picks. But this isn't about Warframe's Duviri. This is about Genshin's Imaginarium, a welcome respite to the tyranny of Spiral Abyss.
So we're pretty much always going to say that Spiral here is relatively terrible. It's a half-baked version of Devil May Cry's Bloody Palace mode that's just asking you to go up against enemies that are a little bit over-leveled using two separate teams of built characters. I don't like playing it consistently. I know that I should. I know that that's how people will determine the meta, but similar to how Star Rail has now split its meta under different categories, so too has Imaginarium Theater.
First of all, we want to get back to basics because the fact of the matter is the average Genshin player either does not know what meta truly means in the concept of a game or is just simply using it incorrectly. So as game designers, we are here to give you the definitive meaning of what meta is.
Meta in its shortest is thriving within the box that the gameplay is contained in. So if the box that the gameplay is contained in changes, that will shift what is good in the meta.
The term meta, as used in game discussion, comes from the term metagaming, meta meaning outside. Metagaming is a discussion that occurs by players of a game outside of the game itself for basically what is an optimum strategy. This is especially prevalent in multiplayer games that have raids or PvPs, where you do, in fact, need to make the best pick that you possibly could in order to either have a fighting chance or to not let your team down. For more information, you can check out the YouTube video entitled Why It's Rude to Suck at Warcraft. Effectively, Imaginarium has created a new box under which a meta is developing. It is growing its own meta, its own player discussion, and its own optimized builds. A lot of the confusion comes with Genshin character tier lists, which don't explicitly state this, but are based entirely off of Spiral Abyss 100% clear rates and the characters picked by those players. This is actually an extremely narrow purview of what meta is because, again, it is actually limited to one niche endgame game mode. Obviously, a game focused on creating characters that are fun to play doesn't want the majority of those characters to be de facto unusable in a high-skill build testing setting. So it is to Genshin's benefit that they create as many metas as possible. Genshin character tier lists are no longer functional as a means of determining a character as meta, as there is now more than one meta, and it would make more sense for Genshin character tier lists to be split up between Spiral Abyss picks and Imaginarium picks. So, in what ways is the Imaginarium meta different than Spiral Abyss meta?
They want you to use a lot of characters.
Yeah, first of all, you don't have full control over which characters you pick. So it encourages you to have a little more versatility than you would if you had full control over your pick like Spiral Abyss. Second of all, it heals everybody right at the beginning.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about mitigating HP loss because you're really only going to be fighting within the context of one battle before everybody is healed fully to max. So it's less of an endurance contest and more of a character management meta.
This also means that you might be able to get away with not having a dedicated healer if you think that you can really muscle and out DPS a certain stage of Imaginarium. That being said, because the time limit on Imaginarium is not as stringent as Spiral Abyss, you can also afford to have tankier, more defensive-based team comps with characters that can soak up damage. I've certainly found Deya to be a surprisingly helpful pick in Imaginarium when I just needed her to soak up some hits when fighting an onslaught of enemies.
Even in some of the defense missions, it's better to just have CC than the ability to finish off enemies because pushing enemies back in certain cases might be more useful than fully removing them from the field.
Yeah.
And when it comes to final boss fights, high DPS with less of a feature on survivability are often more useful. Like we saw that Arlecchino was amazing in the final boss fight of this most recent Imaginarium Theater season because we didn't have to worry about trying to bring a healer in and keep everyone alive. It was just buff her and get her to kill them as quickly as possible.
I also find that Imaginarium's a little more generous, probably because you don't have to manage two teams and you can try an individual stage as many times as you want. And most importantly, you can also reconfigure your team partway through. I know a lot of Spiral Abyss truthers have convinced themselves that Imaginarium is the casual answer to Spiral Abyss, but that's also because they've convinced themselves that Spiral Abyss is fun.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. No, you're right, though.
One thing that's kind of different is Spiral Abyss was always very clearly a metrics test for how many people were getting constellations of characters they already owned. And like seeing where players are investing and things like that. And because Imaginarium is a bit more laterally spread out And because you have limited uses of a character in Imaginarium, that vertical investment.
It's not rewarded as much as a wider spread character base.
What kind of metrics do you think Hoyo is testing for when they look at Imaginarium stats?
I think they're using it to determine what characters are not as built or as widely used, and then maybe in the future they will introduce versions of those, like not like in the way that Don Hung and Illuminator, the Vibrator Lune.
Skibbity
Yes,
Luna.
Skibbity Luna. I don't think in regards to that, I mean that they're releasing new versions of that specific character, but maybe like a new element or weapon combo that are more up to date with the mechanics of the game that can help fill the role that those characters are. Like, I think they may be using it as a metric to see who they can sunset quietly.
Huh, that's an interesting way to
either
think about
sunset
it.
quietly or in the very unlikely event that they're going to patch to improve characters who they can improve.
Or it could be an indirect improvement, like, releasing an artifact set down the line that really benefits a character that's been struggling.
And I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be user testing and improvement of the game stuff. Like, this does mark a point where they say, okay, player base who has whaled, you're big boys and girls now. It's time to start putting all of those built characters to the test. And can you use them if we shuffle them around for you?
Which I like. Genshin has a propensity to get stale really fast.
Yeah.
Forced adaptation is a lot more interesting to me than a weird spiral abyss with its, different buffs and debuffs, but where I ultimately disregard that and just use the same people I always do.
I mean, I think the more cynical take on this is maybe they're not even using it as a means for metric testing. They could just be trying to encourage people to roll across a wider variety of banners.
Yeah, exactly. You
Definitely.
need these characters. You need
Yeah.
them. You can't just rely on the same 8 characters you rolled in 2021. You need them.
You need them. Bennett's great, but you can only use Bennett twice, so you need to find someone else who can do a damage buff. You need to find someone else who can heal.
Bennett and Shangling have carried this game for so long, and at present they can still carry Imaginarium as of the date of this recording, but soon they won't be able to.
I'm sick of those dudes. I like it quite a bit, but that I've also only done the first season of it. I don't know when it's going to get old really fast, but they are clearly putting a ton of weight behind it. The library is going to be a huge hub with nooks and crannies filled with different stations where you can configure things. It's only slightly filled out now, but if Imaginarium proves to be a success, we'll definitely see them deepening it and putting a lot of production value into it. Honestly, it's voiced, it has lore, it has finally some scraps of maybe Hexen Circle stuff. We're getting Mondstadt fairy tale books that haven't been relevant since the start of the game.
We're getting new poses for the photo mode. We're getting
so good
particle effects on the characters. Like, they're really going all out with this one. Like, there's a lot of incentives to play it, both to just see like the minute by minute updates as you're going through with a different party, but also unique rewards that will rotate out.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing is the particle effects require a friendship level with the characters that you want to apply those particle effects to. So it's encouraging you to spend more time with characters that they are directing you towards because you want those rewards.
Yeah, Kirara is free right now in the game, but I haven't gotten her, and I certainly can't get her up to friendship level 8 before her particle effect is going to rotate out, so I'm just going to need to wait for the next time she's in the pool.
It's definitely a badge of honor if you consider yourself a main of that character, and I think that's fun. It's like putting Umbra form on your favorite frame. Play Warframe. I have no doubt that eventually Imaginarium is going to lose a lot of steam and overstay its welcome. I am, however, curious to see how long it will go before that. And I'm hoping it's a good long time.
I can't wait to see the particle effect that they'll eventually introduce for Tartaglia, where we see his water break.
Good for him.
We're all looking forward to it.
Yes.
Once per episode, folks. Once per episode.
Sometimes more than once per episode.
While Genshin kind of failed to hold our attention for a lot of things this year, Imaginarium definitely brought us back. And the ability to rope in a sort of dwindling audience attention is definitely commendable. So that was a big dub on Hoyo's part.
Yeah,
So-
I think it was something I put off starting for a while until I found out about like the particle effects and the unique character poses that they were adding, and so the reward made me more interested. And when I actually did give it a try, I had a lot of fun and had some emotional investment in it, to the point where I was getting really frustrated that I couldn't get past a certain point, not in like a this gameplay mode is designed poorly kind of a way, but more in a what am I not figuring out here? And so I think Hoyoverse did themselves a really great service by introducing this when they did, because we were in such a lull period in Fontaine that at least I don't know about the rest of you, but I was just super burnt out and not interested in playing Genshin as much at the time.
That's all for today's episode. Join us next time as we discuss the Odyssey of the 4.x World Quests. See you then.